of Lubbock. Take a look at the health codes that they are required to enforce. Lots of power there. But how many of us know the name of our city council member? How many of us know the name of our school board member or county commissioner? Shockingly few. Look at the school board races that ultimately determine what your tax rate is going to be, what the spending is going to be in your school district. If 3% show up for a school board election, you would think the world was coming to an end with all the people showing up. Indeed, most school board races, 1.5%, 2% is the statewide average. For bond elections, where they're pulling out the credit card, the taxpayer's credit card to buy stuff, usually stuff you don't need. When they do that, if you get 2.5% of the population turning out, it's considered massive. That's insane. You and I have to make sure that we are as involved and as focused at the most minute levels, at the most local levels, because frankly, that's where people's lives are most directly impacted. You know, think of the concept of liberty. Think of free markets. And then think of trash collection. If you think that your principles, as it relates to integrity in government, as it relates to ideas of liberty, of freedom, has nothing to do with the collection of garbage, I suggest that you look at New York City in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when the garbage collectors kept going on strike because the city council couldn't, agree with them on various things. You literally had trash piling up in the streets. Now, I don't see where it looks much different even when they pick up the trash in New York City. But the consequences were real. In fact, now 20-some years later, 25 years later, there are still health ramifications today from the 2 or 3 weeks that garbage collections didn't happen in New York City. That's power. And yet again, all too often, we simply don't pay attention. We need to be turning out our city council meetings. We have to be turning out at county commissioners' court and school board meetings. Andrew Jackson, one of our presidents who had perhaps the most spotty of records as it related to individual liberty, a guy who thought nothing of trampling on people's rights, seemed to finally kind of get the problem, though, in his farewell address to the American people ending his term as president. When he wrote lines that you and I have all heard, the first sentence, the first sentence of the speech, but about halfway through the speech, he wrote, "Eternal vigilance is the price of liberty." You and I have heard that. A lot of us love that little phrase. We mention it every now and then. But his very next sentence was, and we never talk about this, is it behooves you to be as watchful in your states as in the federal government. He understood that the threats to liberty can come not just from a single tyrant 1,000 miles away, it can also come from 1,000 tyrants a mile away. And you and I have to make sure that we are equally involved in those fights locally as well. I suggest to you that in 2010, we have some great opportunities to pick up seats. One of the worst members, one of the worst Republicans in the entire Texas legislature is Delwyn Jones from right here in Lubbock, Texas. One of the single worst guys there is. He needs to go away. How he keeps getting reelected, I don't know. But he's horrible. Maybe people in his district like him. I don't know. He's simply unconscionable as a conservative. He votes with the Democrats. He votes with the left more often than they do, it seems like sometimes. It's time for him to go away. And there are another 12 to 15 Republicans who campaign as conservatives at home, but who legislate like liberals when they're in Austin. There's another, then beyond that, 15 or so Democrats who do the same thing. David Farabee in Wichita Falls, who just announced his retirement, is a guy, when you look at David Farabee's campaign website, he looks like a right-wing nut, but yet he votes worse than the chairman of the Democratic caucus of the Texas House because he counts on people not paying attention. Now, fortunately, he's going away, which is very happy news, but there are others that we need to make go away too. I have back there our scorecard, where you can take a look and see how various legislators rank on our scorecard and our rating index, the fiscal responsibility index we call it. We'd love for you to grab a couple of those, because we have great opportunities this time to pick up seats, to flip seats from bad guys to good guys. But at the end of the day, that's only going to happen if you and I are making phone calls to people on our Christmas card list saying, hey, did you know that your state rep is a bozo? Hey, did you know your state rep is evil? Hey, did you know your guy needs to go away? You and I have to be very active and very passionate in ensuring that our friends and our family around the state know about the choices they have down ballot. If you are only concerned about one issue, like redistricting, for example, fairly important issue to be concerned about in Texas. We're going to get 4 congressional seats after this next census, particularly since Acorn isn't doing the counting. We'll get about 4 new congressional seats. Lots of new power for Texas. Also redrawing all the state House and state Senate districts. Lots of power concentrated there. The legislators you elect in 2010 will be the ones drawing that map. Right now, Delwyn Jones is the redistricting chairman. Guess what? Delwyn Jones is not going to be able to have y'all's interest at heart because he works for the Democrats and for a moderate speaker. That's who he works for. The urban vote is who he works for. That should be a little troubling to you guys. You think about losing a seat up here in the High Plains area. That should be a little bit troubling. But stepping back from that single issue, we have so many opportunities, so many good things for the future of Texas if we will be active and involved during this upcoming election season. Carl Isett, who I think gets back in about 12 hours from his Naval Reserve duty, he needs to be encouraged to keep running. We need Carl. Lubbock fascinates me. You give me Delwyn Jones, who is an abysmal failure as a conservative, and then Carl Isett, who's getting a 95% R rating and the top of the heap of every conservative group's rating. It's crazy. Anyway, we need to make sure Carl Isett stays in. We need to keep him excited and motivated and engaged, because the other team is relentless. A couple years ago, I was at Reagan National Airport, and it was right before the Democrats took power. Walk in through security, so now you're in a place where you have to have a ticket to be in. Walk through security, and I see this big angry mob yelling at somebody. I'm like, oh, hey, angry mob. I love angry mobs. Let's go see what they're yelling at. I'm sure they're one of us. I get closer. I see the person at the middle who's, everyone's directing their ire at is Nancy Pelosi. Woohoo! I'm home. I was excited because obviously these were my people, right? Oh no! I get in there, yeah, you're horrible, you're evil. Then listen to what the person next to me saying is, they're yelling, why haven't you impeached George Bush yet? And why haven't you shut down Guantanamo? You're evil, you're a traitor, you're a sellout. These were her people yelling at her. You and I need to be doing that, a lot more of that. We need to be a lot more willing to call into account our elected officials in the same way. The other team gets it. If you were to be in Austin this morning, like I was, bad way to start the day. Anyway, if you're in Austin this morning and went to the Capitol like I had to do at 8:30 for a meeting, here we are, middle of September, a long ways out from any legislative session, and yet you could throw a rock down any hall in the Texas Capitol, and you would hit someone who was there lobbying for more spending, for bigger programs, for higher taxes, for more fees. It's phenomenal. The other team is relentless in the way they push and prod and harass and tear down. You and I have to be equally relentless. You and I have to not give up. We have to be consistent, we have to be loud, and we have to be there all the time. One of my ancestors, a guy named Benjamin Rush, who signed the Declaration of Independence. And I reflect on what he and his colleagues signed on August 2nd, 233 years ago, when they all affixed their names to the Declaration of Independence. Only John Hancock had to sign it on July 4th. He's the only one who had to sign it. No one else did until August 2nd. The reason they did it on August 2nd is because something Benjamin Franklin said. As they were filing out of Independence Hall there on July 4th, somebody asked, oh, what are we doing? And he said, well, we all must hang together, for assuredly we shall hang separately. He understood that what they had just signed was life and death.